A programmer and a physicist walk into a bar and they start talking about spirituality. So watch us talk shit about spirituality for 40 minutes straight and criticize us in the comments.
That's it. So, Benef, what are we doing today?
We're talking about Eastern philosophy, spirituality, and all things that concern the spirit of our soul. If I can say that.
Wow. So getting right into it, right?
Yeah.
Very big depth. But okay, to give you a bit of reason why I'm interested in this topic is because what I'm looking for is a kind of secular scientific spirituality. So we know there's a lot of mumbo jumbo out there. We're gonna be discussing some of the books that we actually read, and we were like, "Oh, what the fuck are we just reading?" Right? But I think at the bottom of all this, there is something to take away, even though it might not be what you think. Right? We don't believe in karma or reincarnation or anything like that.
Chi.
Yeah. So what is it that we're looking for here?
Well, you did mention secular. I think we can first start off by discussing the secular Eastern philosophies because spirituality in the West is kind of accepted to be not secular, it's theistic. So it's like Christianity and Islam and stuff like that. If we can call
Yeah, the
that
most interesting
spirituality.
thing is that Buddhism is the only, you can argue that Buddhism is the only kind of secular religion
Yeah.
where it just tells you, okay, empirically, you can do this, you can do that, and then you're going to realize the nature of reality or whatever. But in other religions, it's all about dogma. So you have to have faith, you have to believe some things on insufficient evidence.
I don't agree. I think Taoism also doesn't have the traditional sense of deities. They have deities, but they have been created after Tao Te Ching, the book that was described the way. And in the way, I don't think there were any deities. And even in Buddhism, in certain schools of Buddhism, there are deities. There are the lords
So
of your mind, and they consider them
yeah,
deities.
tell me more about Taoism then, because I haven't studied it. I don't know what it is about. I've done my research in Buddhism, but it's interesting, like you said, Taoism can also be thought of as secular. In what
Right.
way is it
So
humanistic
how
and
it
secular?
happened is somewhere around 500 BC, there came out a well, they don't actually know when it came out, but somebody called Lao Tzu, which is old master or old masters in Chinese because they don't make a difference between singular and plural, wrote this book called Tao Te Ching, and forgive my butchering of any Chinese pronunciations, but it's called Tao Te Ching, and Tao is the way, and De is like, uh, how I understand it is like the internal way or something like that. So like nature and the internal. I might be getting this wrong, but the thing is, they don't explain a deity in the formal sense of the word, but they explain the way. So like it would be everything. So they start describing everything with the dualistic nature of things. So they say when there is a way, there is no separation of objects. There is no high and low because for you to have high, you need to have low. There is no light and darkness because for you to have light, you need darkness. Otherwise, you can't separate them.
Yeah, so to me that sounds more like a metaphysical philosophy. Does Taoism classify as a religion then?
Right. So it started off as a philosophy, and then the Chinese people took it and made it a religion.
Kind of there is some dogma around it,
Yes,
I
they
guess.
started
It just
writing stuff and adding stuff, and they kind of
gets encapsulated in the culture in a certain
yes,
way in
and then
tradition.
it started off as a philosophy, and then it grew into a religion. And I believe Buddhism didn't have the same path, like
So
Buddhism.
out of all of these kind of spiritual teachings, what do you think? I know you've read one book. What's the name of it? You tried to read the book
What on spirituality, the power of
on
now.
spirituality. No, the other
Oh,
one.
okay, yeah, I tried reading Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, and I'm halfway through.
Yeah.
It's
So far in that book, is it? Do you feel like it's all mumbo jumbo, or is there anything useful that you can take away from it?
okay. So this book is written by Chogyam Trungpa, and that dude is a Mongolian, which is actually the last teacher of the Kagyu school of Buddhism. So in Tibet, they have four schools of Buddhism, and Dalai Lama is the head of the newest school. And then there is this other school, which is called the Kagyu, and the Kagyu is the spoken school. So teachings are given through spoken way. So he was the head of this Kagyu school, but after the Chinese invasion of Tibet in 1960, he fled to India and then he fled to the West. This guy Chogyam Trungpa. So he was 20 then, but he was already like Chogyam Trungpa, which means the leader of this school. So he is a very enlightened dude, or at least as enlightened as you can get. He was like basically Dalai Lama, but in another school of Buddhism, which is a bit older.
Okay, but what kind of useful things does the book teach you? Like when you read it, do you think to yourself, "Oh, this is information that's really useful to me," and yeah, I think this guy is
Yeah,
saying the
yeah,
truth,
yeah.
something.
Sorry, I just needed to give him some credibility before I get into the real content. So the book actually talks about spiritual materialism, and that is the Western way of shopping for spiritual goods. Basically, he explains it in that way. So you would go there, and you don't want to give up everything. So he says to be enlightened, you need to give up everything that you know, and that's how you become enlightened. And to give up everything you know, and be open and have a spiritual friend. So he doesn't say it a master, because you have to not have some kind of reverence to a person, but he's just a spiritual friend. He is your equal, but he is just helping you in your way, in your quest to discover enlightenment. And basically people in the West kind of shop for spiritual things, like I'm
So
gonna.
you're saying they're not fully committed, but I watched a lecture on Buddhism, right? Buddhism, the Buddha talks about a middle way, so not completely committing, let's say, to asceticism or abandoning this world, going into solitude, but finding a middle ground. Because at one point in the story of the Buddha, that they were before he was awakened, he was an ascetic, and he was eating like the legends say, right? He's eating a grain of rice a day. But some critical ascetics said, "Oh, you're not fully committing. You're not doing enough." But then, if he did commit fully, he would have died. So he was like, clearly, there's some kind of problem here, and he talks about that middle way between, uh, like you said, shopping in the Western, shopping for spirituality. Well, there's some things that you should do, but then you should balance out with other things, and you shouldn't fully commit to that spiritual life because it's not the right thing to do. It's not the balanced
I
life.
see. Well, that is certainly a different point of view, but I think the Buddha is still saying, you know, commit to spiritual life, but not everyone can do it. Or I'm misunderstanding something. The way I see it is like a spiritual athlete, right? Like monks are like athletes. You just can just cheer them on and help them with whatever you can, and you just hope that they achieve whatever they're after. But it's not for everyone.
Hmm. So, well, but if it's not for everyone, then where's the secular part of it? Like, are we talking about everyone can do these things with their life, and they can experience, let's say, spiritual states, because we're all human, right? And historical figures like the Buddha and Jesus, that there are people who have realized something through their experience, and we should all kind of have that project for ourselves as well.
I think it stems from the fact that we're all different, and not that all of us want the same thing. And some people might want to be deeply spiritual and try to look for that world beyond our own one. And some people are just perfectly content with living with their own little earthly matters.
So I think I disagree on that point. I have a quote here. So in search of the humanistic secular spirituality that like I'm conducting, and Sam Harris says spirituality must be distinguished from religion because people of every faith and of none have had the same sorts of spiritual experiences. So what he's hinting at there is that all of us have some sort of spiritual experiences that are part of our conscious mind, and we can access those states. And he also kind of makes the claim we should access them because they improve our lives.
Okay, I think I agree with that. But what I was referring to was you said that the middle way would be what the Buddha teaches. Like, the middle way would be what everyone should strive for. And I just disagree with that because I think that he says if you want to, you have to devote your life to it, but it's also fine if you just lead a middle way life. You can have some spirituality in your life and you can have some non-spirituality in your life. But if people really want to get into it, well, here's how to do it. And then he gives the whole spiritual teachings, like the 40 years that he taught.
Yeah. Let's clarify something just to make the conversation a bit more foundational. What do we mean by the word spirituality?
Oh,
that's really important
yeah,
for this
the people
conversation to
talking
work.
to spirits, like ghosts and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So what we're not saying is that there's a soul, right? And we're all
Yeah, I'm just joking, by the way.
yeah, we do avoid the supernatural,
Superstitious.
the superstitious. Yeah. So what is left there? What do we mean by spirituality then?
It's the analysis of our own mind, of our own spirit. So spirit is, the soul or spirit, whatever you
I
want
think
to
it
call
comes
it.
from the Greek word for breath.
Yes, yes, and in Bulgarian it's the same, duhovnost.
Oh yeah,
So yeah,
I haven't thought about that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
interesting.
it's actually it's kind of the teaching of, not the teaching, but like the school of thought of who we are. I guess.
I like to take the approach of spirituality is like you've said, kind of like taking your mind as a lab, as like an experiment, and looking for what kind of experiences would you like to have, and what kind of even more general, what kind of life do you want to have. And spirituality is a part of, let's say, our emotional life. That's actually a question I want to touch upon, is whether rationality, like indulging yourself in just reason and rationality, can make you disconnected from the world and leave out something essential for us to live properly and have the good life.
Yeah, I think that's the very argument of the Tao, the way, because to be rational, you need to categorize stuff. You need to categorize stuff. To be rational, you need to have distinction between the objects. But the Eastern philosophy of the Tao say, no, you shouldn't separate anything. It's the way. It's how it is. It's like so I think definitely we are missing something, and there is great wisdom in Taoism, and there is also great wisdom in rationality, and we kind of have to put them and yeah,
Juggle between the two, kind of
yeah,
balance them out. But the thing is, what I believe, so I read the book Waking Up by Sam Harris, and Sam Harris is he's an atheist, right? He's also considered probably not a very spiritual person, more of a materialist, and yet he thinks he can reconcile this sense of spiritual yearning from people with the scientific method and materialism and all that stuff. So is there a way to not balance these things out, but just keep everything scientific, rational, reasonable?
Can you explain a bit more on how Sam Harris thinks he can do that? Like, I fundamentally disagree with that.
Well, he says again, taking the approach of your mind is like a lab. So what, for example, what the
Yeah, but
Buddha teaches is you shouldn't take anything on faith. he says, okay, look, do this, do these exercises, meditate, I don't know, go on a retreat on solitude, and you're gonna find out eventually, or your attitude will change, or you'll realize something else. So it's a testable claim. In reality, you do X and then you get Y, and if you don't get Y, then that means it's false.
I see.
So in that sense, it can be scientific.
But
It's
what
just
if you
our
don't?
own minds.
What if you don't do Y as as you should? The whole teaching of spirituality is very based upon the individual. It's not like a scientific method. That's why it's not science, because it's based on subjective experience. Your spirituality, your enlightenment is different for each one of us. And I think what Sam Harris is describing is mindfulness, and it's not spirituality.
Yeah, but okay, there you said spirituality is subjective essentially. For every single person is different, but there are objective facts about subjective experiences,
Right?
right?
Like what?
And
Give me an analogy.
like we know that when John F. Kennedy was shot, he wasn't thinking about, oh, I hope Penef and I are gonna settle this debate here, right? So there's some things that we know are true about our experiences, and some things we know are false. We can make those kinds of claims, and also there are objective claims about our subjective experiences. Like, are you feeling fear? Are you feeling excitement? And all these different emotions, you can categorize them, right?
Okay.
And Sam Harris's approach is, if you taking the example of mindfulness, right? If you practice mindfulness, you will inevitably, a new state of mind is gonna open to you, which is being more present, being more happy with the present moment, just letting the experiences go through. And this is also measurable, because we know many people get their meditation routine and a couple of months later they start feeling better. And also people who have meditated for years, we can also measure that they have changes in their neurology. Their actual brain works in a different way.
Yeah, I actually completely agree with that. And I'm not trying to disprove that mindfulness is indeed a very useful thing. I'm just saying, I'm kind of being maybe picky here, but it's not spirituality. I think spirituality is a very different thing than mindfulness. I think you have to separate the two, because mindfulness is a part of spirituality, but spirituality is not a part of mindfulness.
What is spirituality then?
Well, spirituality is kind of the way of life. It's kind of when you decide on your spirituality, you kind of decide how you're going to live your life.
So it's the answer to the question, what is the good life? How should I live?
Yes. And I think
Well,
mindfulness is just a tool. It's not the way to live a good life.
yeah, it's definitely a tool, but it's a tool that helps you, yeah, live the good life, and
But it
it's
it doesn't
it's
make
part of the
it.
equation.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
part of the equation, but it doesn't make it. That's what I mean. I agree with Sam Harris. Mindfulness is amazing, but it's not spirituality.
okay, but you took that general approach. What is, to answer the question, what is the good life? We talked about Stoicism in the last episode, and Stoics also had a perspective of what's the good life. Is does their answer is their answer spiritual in that sense?
I think to a certain degree, yes. I think Stoicism is to a certain degree a way of life, what they would call a dharma in Buddhism, or is it Hinduism? I'm not sure. I think it's in Hinduism, but yeah, it's basically a way of life. Yes, I would think Stoicism is a way of spirituality. They call it the Western Buddhism. Yes, I absolutely
Mm.
think to a certain
Yeah,
degree it
that's
is.
true.
But it's also a philosophy, because it also has the elements of logic and physics and all that other stuff. And it's basically Marcus Aurelius taught how to live a good life, you know? Well, he didn't teach, but you get what I mean.
I want to move on a bit here and talk about psychedelics as a way to be spiritual. So they are making, at the moment, they are making studies into the way psychedelics can influence people and through these spiritual experiences. Of course, it's scientific research, so they're having fMRI scans on their brains. They want to see what's going on. They also ask them about their subjective experience. Even here in Imperial College London, they're making these studies, this research, whether psilocybin, the ingredient in magic mushrooms, can cure depression. And I think they have done one study already. They're opening another one soon. So the topic here is what's going on in psychedelics. People describe these remarkable experiences that they have, and it's like something significantly changes within them. They describe it as a spiritual experience. So what's going on there?
Well, what do you think?
Well, I think it's fundamentally there's nothing unreal, nothing unphysical about it, because people, after they have their experiences, they realize, for example, that they're hallucinating, that did not actually happen in the physical world, but still it impacted them, it changed something in them. They see the world in a different manner. So clearly there's something going on in the brain. Something happens to your brain. You can think of it as like a paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm. So you think there is some kind of truth to spirituality that can be proven through psychedelics? Is that what you're saying?
Could you repeat that?
So you're saying that there is a scientific basis for claiming spiritual state of mind is possible through psychedelics, because
and you would describe it with changes of brain states.
Yeah.
Right? Something happens to your brain. I guess your imagination is running wild. They also measured through fMRI scans. They saw that the brain like has these massive connections during it. It just explodes during psychedelics. You're able to make different connections with different parts of the brain that your normal day-to-day conscious state does not produce. So clearly there's something happens there. And I like to look at it from this physical perspective.
Absolutely.
And also, listen to what experiences they have, because the best way to know what's going on is also to ask the patient themselves.
Yeah. I think psychedelics is a very solid scientific basis to claim that enlightenment and spirituality is not it's not all bullshit. There is some truth, and we can actually observe that in those experiments with psychedelics. Completely different state of mind, and I'm very excited to see where this research is going to go. And because they've done a lot of research on monks as well and stuff like that, meditating, and they've seen some crazy effects, like actually even on Wim Hof. They do experiments to him, and they find out like things that have been considered impossible for the human body, that he can do it at will. It's like insane.
Oh yeah, the immune system, right? They can they think about just fighting a disease that they put in their blood. They inject it, and their body naturally produces more adrenaline, which triggers the immune system, and they just fight the disease.
And doesn't get inflamed.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. So I absolutely agree that there is secular basis for claiming that spirituality is a real thing, and that is why it's very important to have this discussion.
Yeah, and now it's just what's left is, okay, there is secular spirituality, but what is it? How do we integrate it in our lives?
And how do we discern the bullshit from the real thing?
Yeah, well, that's a big thing. Let's talk about The Power of Now, which I read a couple years ago. You tried to read it as well. And Eckhart Tolle is not, I don't know. What Eckhart Tolle, he looks like a good spiritual teacher, calm and has charisma as well. But what he writes in his book, I don't agree with most of it. It's just mumbo jumbo. It has no foundations, right? Yes. So he's just making claim after claim. I just couldn't get anything from it.
Yes, same for me. I read like an hour and a half and I couldn't get much into it. I was just so pissed off at the way the book is written. It's like in a condescending tone. Like you don't understand. Like somebody asked him a question, he's like, "You don't understand." Okay, but make me understand. You don't just say you don't understand. So it's written awfully, and also I think there are way better spiritual teachers. So that's why I went for.
But influential people like Jim Carrey is, I think he's part of that, let's call it a cult, part of Eckhart Tolle's cult. And clearly people are finding things there
Oh
that
yeah.
are missing
Oh yeah.
from their lives.
I think it's very easy.
This, yeah,
Go ahead.
this is my concern again, going back to rationality and reason. When you indulge in this materialistic universe, we're all made of stuff, and there's no area, there's no gap for spirituality and having being fulfilled in life. People, do you think people are drawn to cults more in that way?
Well,
Spiritual
the way
cults.
I think they get drawn into it, I think it's very well described in the book I'm currently reading. It's like spiritual charlatans. They kind of do it for. So they take something and they make it marketable, and what you do is you say a lot of things, and people will inevitably kind of identify with some of those things that you say and find them as truth. You know, the same way religion spread in the ancient times. Somebody knocks on your door, hello, Buddhism is great, and it says life is suffering. And then you say, oh, well, I have always thought that life is suffering as well. I should become a Buddhist. So Eckhart Tolle is like the same thing. Oh, well, I'm suffering from anxiety. So this guy somehow overcame anxiety in one night. So I can do it as well. Because he says really profound shit. Come on, man. I mean, I'm not.
That's a harsh criticism, but I do agree with it for the most part, because it looks to me as if there's no ground. He's just talking, I don't know, whatever comes up. And I guess the main argument he uses is that we all live in the present moment and there's nothing else. And that's actually a factual statement.
Yes.
We can focus on that for a bit. We do live in the present moment.
Yes.
There's no past, there's no future. That's not, I wouldn't say that's a spiritual claim.
Yes.
And that's the ground for a lot of spiritual teachings.
Absolutely. I think most philosophies actually address that. You know, even Stoicism says if you're living in the past, you're depressed. If you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. But if you're at peace, you are living in the now.
And Epictetus says, I have to die. I have to die. If it is now, well, then I die now. If later, then now I will take my lunch, since the hour of lunch has arrived.
Yeah.
And dying, I'll tend to later. So that's part of like Stoic humor.
Yeah.
And they do agree that
Oh.
each of us is looking only at the present moment.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's really great to understand that, but it's not a basis of what Eckhart Tolle is kind of trying to sling. I mean, okay, he would say, well, you're being defensive because you still have an ego and you have to kill it. But I think we can talk about how I don't agree in ego death, and I can kind of explain why. Do you have an opinion on this?
Well, ego death, first of all, it would be good to speak to people who claim they have experienced it, so you try and understand. But what's your take on it?
Well,
On the experience of ego death?
how I understand it is you have a self, you have, so there's two people in you. So there's the silent observer that kind of observes everything, and then there is the self, the ego, which judges everything, which separates things, which labels things and stuff like that. And this person is the source of all of our troubles. So because you judge something as bad, it gives you sorrow, and because you think that something is painful or anything else like that, it brings about suffering, and you're scared that somebody will judge you, and all of that stuff. It all stems from the ego, and they say, well, we have to kill that ego and just be left with a silent observer, which is observes everything in peace, and that peace brings about joy.
Mm-hmm. And where in that argument do you disagree?
That once you kill your own self, and you can only observe stuff, you can't experience it. You only observe it, but how do you experience it subjectively? You can't.
Hmm.
You always be in the equation. Somebody who has to experience everything is always there. Once you stop experiencing, you stop existing. I'm an ardent believer of cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. So
But I think, therefore I am. So if you're not thinking, if you're just feeling, because I thought that's actually an interesting experiment that you can do. Sit down and try and notice what a monkey mind you have. You're basically an abstract ape all the time, coming with different ideas. And don't you think that there are periods of time where you just stop thinking? Maybe it's even for 5 seconds, and you're still there. You're just mindful, and you are experiencing. People who have meditated for longer times, maybe had their routine, I think they would sympathize better with what I'm saying. But it's kind of the experience of not having any thought and just being the observer in the background, and that's an experience that you can have.
yes, I do agree.
Isn't that the experience of ego death?
Sure, I think in some way, yes, but in other ways, because after that experience there is somebody to judge that, only then are you aware of if that was good or bad. I'm saying if there is nobody to judge that, you can't say if it's good or bad, so you can't have joy. Like, you are ridding yourself of suffering, but you're also ridding yourself of everything else. Joy, happiness, everything like that, you're throwing away for the price of peace. And peace is not that. I don't know. I'm a passionate person, you know. I guess I'm just flawed, but I like my desires, and I think not having somebody to judge stuff makes my life kind of meaningless. And you can say it's already meaningless and stuff like that, but I don't know. I just like having a deeper meaning, and a lot of people will disagree with that. They say, well, that's wrong because desires make you do bad stuff and stuff like that. But I don't know.
Well, there's clearly some desires that are rational, right? You want to have good health, for example. Why would you want to have cancer? Like,
Yes.
you're trying to avoid having diseases. Whenever you have one, you go and treat it like you should. And there are other desires which are self-indulgent, and they can turn into addictions. So I guess, again, hinting at the middle way, which is don't aim at desirelessness. Clearly, if you do that, you're likely to die because you're not fulfilling your, let's put it in more of a biological terms, you're not fulfilling your needs for survival.
Yeah.
And but then again, clearly, as we see in Western culture, people indulge in all sorts of entertainment and activities that clearly are not healthy for them.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a middle path in the middle where you limit the desires up to a certain point.
Yeah, and actually, that's what the Tao Te Ching actually has a line addressing this. Well, it's not a line; it's like a little paragraph. It says, "Hence, always rid yourself of desires in order to observe its secrets, but always allow yourself to have desires in order to observe its manifestations." So, rid yourself of desires to be able to observe, to silently observe, but then also have ego so that you can experience those manifestations of information, because that's a big thing of how I can't reconcile ego death with life, because once you experience ego death, you stop caring about your body. But if there is no body, well, how do I know I'm going to exist? Well,
I see.
so I think for you to believe in ego death, you kind of have to really let go and say, well, I don't really care if I die or not. I just want peace. And I'm just not at that level yet.
What about the spiritual experience of unconditional love? I think Jesus talks about it more. So Christianity has that more instilled in the religion, despite the dogma. And again, going back to Waking Up by Sam Harris, he describes the way his journey into spirituality came by is through an MDMA experience he had when he was a teenager in college. And he said that for the first time when he took the drug, that was before it was even a party drug, right? It came from a more of a therapeutic background. And the way they took it was with a friend of his. They just decided to sit on a couch, have a conversation and see what that drug can do to their minds. And he describes just at one point feeling this sense of, oh, I love my friend. And it sounds cliche to say, right? He's my best friend, I love him. But it was like for the first time he felt sane. And also more importantly, he thought, he imagined if someone walks in the room, even if it's a stranger, he would feel unconditional love for them as well. So it's kind of dropping that ego part that we're talking about, right? You're not,
I would say
you're dropping all of your defenses
I
down.
would say that's biological.
What do you mean?
It's based on the drug. It's just your dopamine is like off the charts. You're so happy that you have not a single droplet of hatred towards anything. You just have love. You have only joy in your system. I've kind of experienced something like that under the influence.
So you're saying it's not sustainable then?
It's absolutely spiritual. I would say it's absolutely spiritual, but I think it's also biological.
So you're putting a molecule in your mind and then it wears out?
Yes, I don't think it's sustainable.
Yeah, but it's an experience and...
Oh yeah, absolutely. After that experience, you really learn a different way of looking at things. You can really love everyone, but for that to happen, you really need to be...
Also, you said it's biological. I guess you mean it's just a one-time experience, then it wears off?
No, I think you can still get to it.
Yeah, because I want to mention that MDMA in some circles is used to treat PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, there is some evidence that it sticks kind of after maybe a session, maybe a couple of sessions. People do diminish in their they see improvement in their lives. They have cured in a way their PTSD, and that means that it's long-term as well. You're doing something to your brain, okay, but it sticks with you, that experience, somehow, and cures you from it. So there is something more to it there.
Yeah, absolutely. But I just think that for you to experience that kind of unconditional love, it's very hard to be sustainable. Like almost, I can't comprehend how somebody can be in that state of mind at all times. It would be really, really fucking sick. Not gonna lie.
Really I think sick. What we do in a way is idealize these spiritual figures like the Buddha and Jesus. In that way, we think that they were like this all the time. But don't you think there's some truth to it? For example, if the Buddha actually existed and did all these things and sat down on a tree, I don't know, became an ascetic and then started teaching it, don't you think that his experience was different in some fundamental way from our experience?
Oh yeah, obviously. I mean, are you talking about the role of myth in...
Yeah, so the role there is a lot of myth to it, right? It's fiction. We weren't there.
Yeah, it's fiction.
It's fiction, but there is some truth to it.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of wisdom to learn from it.
Yeah, and there's also the question here is there a way to reach that state and to actively practice it and take the project of being like some of those spiritual leaders very serious?
Yes. Well, that's where we have to kind of learn how to discern things. And I think to be able to discern things with confidence, I think the only way is through subjective experience.
Yeah, it's really hard to navigate this field because it's based on subjective experience.
Everyone has their own individuality and their own kind of ideas of things. And that's why I don't blame people believing in Eckhart Tolle's thing. Because people are different. People believe in what they consider true. There is a subjective truth.
Yeah, but people believe in all kinds of nonsense, and they're deluded in a lot of ways.
Yes. Well, how do you know that they're deluded? How would you kind of judge that?
Well, I can't, for example, take seriously a person who believes that, let's say, the Earth is, I don't know, 6,000 years old, and that the actual human, the first human, was made using clay or something, right? That's Adam and Eve. Because clearly this is not a claim based on reality. If you really wanted to know,
Mm-hmm.
you would, I don't know, you have to maintain a very high level of delusion in order to think in that way.
Well, yes, but these people think that we're all deluded. It's not they that are deluded, we're all deluded. They would say, well, you and your science, you guys are fucking deluded. How would you argue against that?
Because, okay, and here's where we value actually testable hypothesis.
Yes, but
like, if
testable
that is true,
hypothesis,
then
it's still based on subjective experience.
is it?
Yeah, how would you know that the world exists if you're not there?
Whoa.
I mean, I'm just
Where are we going?
saying.
What I mean by testable hypothesis is you, let's say you say a statement, right? You have a hypothesis,
Yes.
and then you think of what it implies. Okay, this, if this is true, then this, then that, and then you try and test all of the things that come out of that.
If that makes sense, yeah. No, I'm just being the devil's advocate here, but I can just I see how these people can think they're not deluded, because in essence everything is subjective. Everything is there. We have no way of knowing if there is objective truth or not.
Is it though?
You have to make
aren't we living in the
leap.
same world?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I see it that we have to make the leap and assume that there is objective truth for there to exist science. Otherwise, it's only religion and spirituality. And I think because spirituality is still there, even if there is no objective truth, and that's why it's so important to actually analyze it in a different way than any scientific method.
Yeah, but I still, like, I'm still clinging to that part of me that says, if you analyze it, then you should use the same tools as you use with everything else, in particular science.
Well, yes, but if you remove science and there is spirituality left, it's obvious that it's on another level. So how would scientific methods work in spiritual matters?
Yeah, the only way I can think of is through falsifiable claims. That's why Buddhism has infiltrated Western science, as, you know, people are saying meditation, blah, blah, blah. And because those are testable. Okay, meditate for a couple of months, then go into a lab, get a brain scan, something will have changed, and your experience would also have changed.
Okay, but what if science is not there yet to actually just prove all the other stuff that spirituality is claiming?
Yeah, is it gonna be there in the future after?
I don't know.
Research?
I think, genuinely, I think science is just not there yet to examine the subjective that well.
I think the hard problem of consciousness, I don't know if you've heard about it. That's one of the hot topics in science right now, is how do you explain consciousness with physical processes, with neurons firing or other models. And no one has solved it yet. That's why it's called the hard problem of consciousness. But it's still, I guess it's a leap of faith, you might say.
Exactly, that's what I was saying. Argument.
But I think we are catching up. We are improving our understanding, and with enough time, everything will be lined up.
Yes. And I think that's why we have to be very careful with these occultists and stuff like that. Who knows? Maybe they are onto something and we just don't know it yet. Maybe science is just not there yet.
So the one thing that is very important when you navigate
be open.
Be open, but be skeptical.
Yes.
Find the middle way.
Yes. Don't believe
the middle
everything.
Way between
obviously.
Openness and skepticism.
Yeah, but I think that's a part of openness. I think not believing everything. You're open to new ideas, but you're not going to take them. You just let them pass. You just observe them peacefully. Okay. I have a question for you. Do you think we should seek enlightenment?
Well, what do you mean by enlightenment?
Well, what is your idea of enlightenment?
So I'm gonna define enlightenment, and I'm gonna say what if you have to reach it, if you have to do it. Is that what you want me to do?
Yes. I think that is the next part of the question.
Dan Harris, the one that made the app 10% Happier, wrote a book called 10% Happier. Mm-hmm. He's an advocate of meditation.
Is it Sam Harris's brother?
No, they have the same surname, but Dan Harris is journalist, news reporter, but then yeah, he wrote that book. And he says you can't clear your mind.
I'm
He
just
says
making sure I have a thumbnail.
you can't clear your mind unless you are enlightened. Well, congratulations, or you're dead. Very sorry. But what he means, I guess, by enlightenment in this case is clearing your mind of all thoughts. And we don't want to do that. Again, we talked about the middle way. You shouldn't become fully absorbed in that idea of not thinking about anything, right? Just clearing your mind completely. That's not possible. But I would argue a more practical idea, which is you shouldn't aim for enlightenment. You should aim for a good life, and a good life constitutes not being pushed around by your mind and constantly thinking, obsessing about thought.
Yeah,
And that's a very practical idea.
that's
So
what
you don't have
Eckhart Tolle says. Mind is just a tool. Don't become a slave to it.
So he has some good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Eckhart Tolle has a lot of good stuff. It's just he it's spiritual teachings of the old that he's trying to sell to people. Anyway,
In the
so
new age stuff.
why should we look for that state of non-thinkingness?
Because if you're stuck in thought all the time, you're thinking all the time,
So what?
that's not good for you.
Why?
Well, have you had the experience of just being obsessed with thought
I
and
am
maybe reminiscing
constantly
about...
being obsessed with thought.
Yeah.
I cannot turn off my mind. But why should I stop that? I am happy. Why should I look to discover enlightenment?
Okay, so I think here the question is, whenever you feel like you are nagged by your mind and you are constantly thinking and you can't get your life together and you're constantly thinking about the past or you're worrying about the future, then you can ask that question, why should I speak about enlightenment? If right now you're feeling perfectly fine and you're happy and everything's going well for you, then I don't think you can get an answer to that question, because what are you going to find?
Well, I think that's what these spiritual teachers are trying to get across, that everyone should look for spiritual enlightenment, right?
Yeah, but again, like we talked about sales before, right? Before the podcast.
And
They're not
exactly spiritual materialism. This is what I mean.
they're not selling they're not saying you should do it and I tell you to do it and I'm an authority. They're saying if you have questions and you want to learn from me, then come ahead. And that kind of attitude, I guess, gets a lot of people into it very quickly. But the idea is, if you're looking for it, you can go and find it. Speak to different spiritual teachers, speak to what they have, learn about what they have to say, and hopefully you will manage to get rid of all the bullshit.
Okay, but I know that I can experience this as I am right now, which is I am happy, and I can subjectively confirm it. However, I cannot subjectively confirm that enlightenment is going to be better. So why should, if I start experiencing suffering and stuff like that, why should I look for enlightenment instead of the state I am right now? Why shouldn't I just look to just become happy again?
Yeah, it requires for you to understand. So it's like I'm a teacher here. Not really. I think for you to understand that is you have to have a change in attitude. If you're constantly looking for fulfillment in your desires or avoiding pain, then yeah, you're just gonna add new content to your brain. You're gonna read books, you're gonna watch lectures, you're gonna try and go out and do some stuff. And that's what Western society is all about, right? Changing your environment, controlling your environment, doing things to it. But the Eastern approach is, no, you feel what it's coming, you are more present, and you stop yourself from being nagged by your brain all the time and all these thoughts coming up. You try and silence them.
So you are.
Do you see what I'm talking about? I'm
little.
talking about a change in attitude, a change in the way you decide what happiness is and how to achieve it.
But why should I strive for it? This works for me. Why should I look for the other thing that I can't confirm is going to work for me? Maybe I'm just too big of a materialist, and even if I change my attitude, I'm still not going to be happy with having the ground to sleep on.
I think I'm even more of a materialist than you, but I still think that there's something to be learned here because it's
Oh
talking
yeah,
about is your
absolutely.
experience.
I,
Yeah.
there is something to be learned here, but I'm just shopping. I'm not trying to go there. I'm just shopping. I'm just taking some stuff from this spiritual teaching, from that spiritual teaching, and I never commit fully. And that's what spiritual teachers would say, well, that's bullshit. And I just don't understand it. I thought that you might have a different perspective on this, but I think we're on the same boat here. Or am I
Yeah.
mistaken?
Also, I wouldn't take any teacher. The reason I undertook the practice of meditation is because it's scientifically studied right now, and they have looked at monks and seen that they can produce these states of mind. Like they put them in an fMRI scan and tell them, okay, now meditate, and you can literally see how their default mode network shuts down, like turns off,
Yeah.
and then the whole brain starts like connecting, integrating, and that's just mind blowing. So there is something to be had there.
Yeah. Science is the great teacher, huh? You believe science more than anyone else. Well,
Um,
science is smarter than everyone else, so I guess you have a point. Now,
I hope I have a point. Yeah.
this leads into my next question. What is meditation? I think there is a very certain paradox of meditation in spiritual disciplines and mindfulness.
Meditation, there's so many different types. If you want to focus just on mindfulness, right? This is
Mm-hmm.
what we're talking about, mindfulness meditation. Is it?
I'm just talking about meditation in general.
Mm. So I don't. Yeah, there are so many different
Your way. Let's
practices that
let's talk
are.
about your way of meditation because obviously we can't get into all of them.
Yeah, mindfulness meditation, which is the one that's proven to be effective, is you just try and be mindful of all of your experiences without judging them. And again, I say try because no one's gonna be good at it from the beginning. And you can do things like just observe your breath, right? You are feeling the breath coming in, coming out. You are noticing sounds around you. And this mindfulness practice brings you closer to the present moment, which is what's happening right here and right now, and is good in silencing the monkey mind we all have, silencing all the thoughts that can be overwhelming at times.
Okay, so meditation is the activity of controlling your mind.
Yeah, let's say of taming your thoughts. Let's put it in that way.
Controlling your mind as you wish,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
willfully. Like if I say I'm not going to think about anything, I'm not going to think about anything. Is that not controlling your mind?
Yeah, but that's still a thought, right? That's not what you're doing in mindfulness meditation. You are allowing the thoughts to come and go.
But you have uh, the the desire to stop thinking. That's what starts it all.
Is it though? Well, I'm saying, yeah, that's going back to the sales perspective. That's how you get people drawn in meditation, but you don't have to go with that attitude. You can just say, "Oh, I want to meditate because it's gonna improve my life," in a sense. So just pick a reason why you want to do it. It doesn't have to be, "I want to silence my mind," or "I want to be enlightened." Like I'm not doing meditation to become enlightened.
Okay, but then why do you need to control your thoughts? Why do you want to be able to turn off your brain at will?
Because that's part of the good life, and it improves your life drastically in many areas. You become more self-disciplined. You're again not nagged by your mind all the time, and you can notice whenever you can notice your emotions better as well. When you get angry, what's the normal response people have? They are triggered by that anger and they reproduce it all the time. They think about things they should be angry. Well, I'm arguing that with meditation you can be in a place where you can just feel that anger and let it pass through. And what you're going to notice is you can't be angry for more than a couple of moments at a time because it's unsustainable. Why would you want to be in that state? And that's a realization that you can have, and it's kind of like a click in your brain. It's really hard to describe, but that's one of the perks of
Yeah,
meditation.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree. Okay. No, I think I had a different paradox in mind when it comes to ego death. I don't think you can can meditate if your ego is dead.
What does the ego being dead mean?
The one who judges. So how I think of it, I've written this down. So the definition of thinking is manipulating information, right? Would you say that is so?
Yeah, it's a bit abstract.
Yeah, but okay. Let's just take that as an axiom. So if our ego is dead, we're only aware of that information. We can only observe stuff. We're perfectly present in the now, and we notice everything. We're like how I meditate is like I imagine I'm an animal, and I'm trying to sleep, but at the same time be perfectly aware of what's happening around me. So like I don't think about anything else, but like overload my mind with what I'm getting from the environment. Only sensory experience. I don't think about anything abstract in my mind. Only sensory experience. So what I feel in my is it kinetic feel? I'm not sure. The sense that of touch, how I feel the ground under my legs and stuff like that. What my breath is doing, the sounds that I hear, and all those senses. I only take that information. But if you only observe the information, how are we aware? How can we if we start manipulating it, and once we start analyzing and manipulating this information to form thoughts, our ego is sprung to life. So I think you can't think if your ego is dead. Like you can only observe stuff through sensory experience, but once you start thinking, your ego is alive.
Mm-hmm. I like the idea of your aim is to only experience the sensory feelings,
Yes.
that you get, so without thinking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you're aiming with meditation. And I don't think there's a paradox there, because you can also, can you say you can experience thoughts, so just be the observer of thoughts?
I don't know.
I think the moment, so if you have experienced meditation, the moment you try to do that, the thoughts disappear. The moment you realize
It's a
you're
thought
thinking,
in itself.
the moment you realize you're thinking, your attention is bound to whatever you're experiencing.
Okay. Yes. I think, but I think it's kind of a thought in itself. The kind of us, the sensory experience is a thought in itself, because for us to actually understand that we have these sensory experiences, we need to manipulate the information somehow in our brain.
Mm-hmm.
Because like otherwise we don't have a will. Like the silent observer doesn't have a will.
Yeah,
Can't
I
make
see.
decisions.
That's
Doesn't have choices. He only observes.
that to me is really abstract. I'm trying very hard to kind of ground it
Oh,
in reality
I
to
have a
see.
question for you.
Yeah.
How is pausing your mind helping you? When you
How
focus,
how is what?
yes, so meditation. You start thinking only about what you experience sensory.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not just pausing your mind? When you exit that state, you're just going to start thinking again.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
So it's
We
just a
we
pause
think
in
all
your
the time.
mind.
Mm-hmm.
So
I
how
guess
does that
it's like a.
stop you from thinking bad stuff?
I guess the better analogy here is like a bicep curl. So if for 20 minutes a day you exercise your mind in that way, throughout the day you're
You
gonna be
can
more
navigate it better.
conscious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see.
So you get better through time because it's like a muscle,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it grows.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I really like that. Cool. I'm happy with that explanation. That's great. I've always been an ardent believer in meditation, and I think that's exactly the only point where I can consider it. It is very useful to navigate your brain. Hmm.
Do you wanna start wrapping it up?
If you don't have any more questions, yes, because I can talk all day about this. This is great. I've had a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, I think so. We've covered
One
the
last
main
question.
point
One
here.
last question, maybe.
Let's go.
So, what is the basis for judging one's enlightenedness? How do I know that I'm not already enlightened? If enlightenment is different for everybody, and that's what the gurus say, and they say, well, I'm enlightened. Cool, but like, what's the basis? How do I know
How do
objectively?
you measure enlightenment?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a scientific question. I don't think you do, and there's no point in measuring. It's all about whether you are happy in the present moment, you're happy with your experience or not. And I guess the enlightened person, if that person exists, is the one that has clarity of mind most of the time.
what's clarity of mind?
I would describe it as a feeling, clarity of mind, being at peace with yourself.
With yourself? With your ego?
Yeah, so you've experienced that, right? Being completely at peace. We have those moments of awe and maybe, yeah, a peace of mind and all that, but we've only had them for a brief period of time.
Sure.
I would assume, as an unenlightened person, that that's the experience that everyone's talking about, because the religious language and the spiritual language is all the same. Present moment, peace, tranquility, unconditional love, and this is the only tangible experience that I can attach to those words.
Would you not say that you had already been enlightened when you experienced those moments of awe? Were you not enlightened in that moment? Because enlightenment is not something that is created and destroyed. Because for a creation to exist, there also needs to be destruction, if we remember Taoism. Taoism.
Okay, that's.
So I think
didn't
it's,
quite get.
if we use the analogy of a sky, so you had a moment of awe where the clouds cleared up and you could see the bright blue sky, but then it got cloudy again. So I think you were enlightened in that moment of awe. So I think we're all enlightened in some way, and we just have to discover that enlightenedness.
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it metaphysically. That analogy is used in meditation as well, which is the sky is always there. Sometimes it's
That's where I
cloudy,
got
it's
it
full
from.
of thought. Yeah, it's full
Shout
of
out
thoughts
Headspace.
and shout out to Headspace looking for a sponsorship.
Yeah,
But yeah, enlightenment is I don't think it's a permanent state. Like, I don't think religious figures like the Buddha and Jesus were constantly, having that
ooh, that's
euphoria.
revolutionary. You're willing to make that claim? A lot of people are gonna come after your head.
Yeah. I think they were humans like me and you.
Oh yes, I also do agree.
Yeah.
And I think when you said about the unconditional love, I've experienced that stuff. Like, I am positive, I'm confident that I've experienced that, and it's amazing. But it's not sustainable. You can't have
You
it.
don't think it's sustainable? And their argument is that it is sustainable, that you just have to follow certain practices, certain way of life,
Yes, yes,
realize it.
yes. Well, that would be great, but I think biology also plays a good part in it.
Yeah, I mean, they were taking advantage in some way through their biology.
Yeah, but when I say biology, we know that biology can be manipulated by Wim Hof. So I don't know what to believe anymore. Maybe it's a real thing. But
What's going on here?
yeah, I'm not ready to give away my life for something like that. I'd much rather do some scientific discoveries than love everyone unconditionally.
So, what do you think is the conclusion from our 1 week exploration of spirituality? What do we end the episode on?
It's absolutely lovely. Spirituality is a source of great wisdom. And I think everyone needs some degree of spirituality in their life for it to not be completely empty, but not too much, because too much is also not bad. Balance in all things. The way.
Find the middle way.
Yes, find the middle way.
I like that idea.
Yes, the Tao. So, yeah, call me a Taoist, I guess. What about you?
All right, guys. Thanks a lot for watching.
I don't know. What about you? What did you get out of this podcast?
I would say I'm still in search for this secular spirituality, and the answer for me lies in practices like meditation, using psychedelics for it. Of course, we're still waiting for the research to come out and to confirm all this. But if there's a place to look for spirituality, I think it's in those exercises and those practices.
You ever tried DMT?
No, I haven't yet.
All right. Let's wrap it up.
All right, guys. See you next time.